If it pleases the court, my name is Moorhead, initial M, and I appear with my learner junior, Oxley, initial M. We represent the defendant, the Quixley Hotel. Your Honour, the plaintiff claims in this court that it has suffered damage in the form of personal injury as a result of the negligence of the defendant. The defence refutes this claim on the basis of submissions 1 to 4 in the outline of arguments. Your Honour, I will be presenting submissions 1 and 2, and my learner junior will present submissions 3 and 4. The defence concedes that a duty of care arose identical to that pleaded by the plaintiff and to that held to exist in Adil's Palace versus Morbarak. It is a duty to exercise reasonable care and skill to prevent the injury from other patrons. The duty is not absolute, and the hotel does not become the insurer of the patrons against harm. I will now address submission 1. The determination of liability is guided by the Civil Liability Act of 2003, Queensland. Section 91C requires that it be established that a reasonable person would have taken the precautions in the circumstances. In deciding whether a reasonable person would have taken those precautions, Section 9.2 requires a consideration of the probability that the harm would have occurred if the precautions had not been taken. The inquiry is to be assessed prospectively. Your Honour, the defence submits that it was reasonable in the circumstances for the hotel manager to act to remove the broken plate from the group and dispose of it safely, to take a reasonable amount of time to consider the most prudent and safe course of action in the circumstances, to obtain assistance from other staff or police, and to take the view that to eject the group in the heat of the moment may actually lead to an increased risk of harm to the other patrons. Your Honour, in Wagstaff versus Haslam, it was held that it is not reasonable to treat every intoxicated person as a potential source of unprovoked violence. An additional element of knowledge is required. Either knowledge of past adverse behaviour when the person's been intoxicated, or knowledge observed on the particular occasion that the harm occurs. There was no such behaviour by Eleanor that would suggest a risk of the probability or magnitude as to give rise to a duty to remove her from the hotel. Your Honour, the hotel manager, he first became aware of the risk of harm when he heard the plate break, and Your Honour, minutes or seconds later the assault occurred. It is submitted in the circumstances, taking into consideration the time available to the manager to act, that the precautions taken by the manager were reasonable. Your Honour, in the previous 12 years of operation of the Quixley Hotel, there have been no incidents of violence. The particular event on that day in question was held in daylight hours between the hours of 12 and 5 p.m. Children were welcome and children were accommodated for, as well as families. In these circumstances, it is submitted that the magnitude and probability of the risk to be foreseen on that particular afternoon did not give rise to the need to provide a security guard. In addition, to impose such a duty in the circumstances would place an unnecessary financial burden on the hotel, a material consideration under Section 9.2c of the Civil Liability Act. I move now to submission 2. Section 11.1a requires that the breach of duty was a necessary condition of the occurrence of harm. This first element of causation is to be determined by the but-for test. That is, but for the breach of duty by the hotel, the harm would not have occurred. Borrowing again from the decision in Wagstaff versus Haslam, the correct approach to causation in these particular circumstances is not to ask if the manager had been successful in removing the patrons from the hotel, would the assault have occurred, but to ask if the manager had begun to take reasonable steps to remove the group from the hotel, would the assault have occurred. In addition, given the mindset of Eleanor, it is more probable than not that even in the presence of security guard, she would have that would not have deterred her behaviour. Even if the security guard were present at the precise moment in time, it is more probable than not that his attention would have been given to the two aggressors, Keith and Conrad, and not to Eleanor. Your Honour, it is submitted that that the absence of a security guard and the failure to eject the group from the hotel were not necessary conditions of the occurrence of the harm done to the plaintiff. I now hand over to my learned junior.